I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The roll call, please.
I couldn't bend down.
Mr. Arcuri?
Here.
Mr. Bova? Mr. Bradsky?
Here.
Mr. Core?
Yes.
Mr. Coyne?
Here.
Mr. Julia?
Here.
Mr. Ford?
Yo.
Mr. Kane? Mr. Karam?
Here.
Mr. Motolo?
Here.
Ms. Sesney? Here. Mr. Wallace?
Yes. You have the draft August 21, 2017 minutes in your packet. Is there a motion to approve?
I approve.
A second? Any discussion, corrections, deletions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Next item on our agenda, resolution, decision regarding establishment of water rates, fees, and charges effective January 1, 2018. Who's doing that, Pat?
I guess I'll introduce it if that's okay.
Or Jim? Or
Yeah, I was just going to mention that there's a packet that you guys have that has a rubber band around it. I think in the in the back is the schedule of water rates. Okay. In addition to the 50 copies I just gave away.
Something separate.
that's so we can solve.
Yeah, it's something separate.
Oh, yeah, was that? I thought it was. I picked one.
Okay, well, we'll finish handing those out after. I don't want to confuse people.
Couple of quick highlights, if I may. For those of you that were downstairs, you heard all this, so I apologize. But I just want to point out and reiterate that aside from a general water rate increase, we also have in the packet a couple of fees that we proposed increasing just to truly reflect our costs, because we were losing money on a few of them. Has to do with paving restoration, as those costs have gone up, and also the cost to do repair work on asbestos cement pipe, which we used to do ourselves, but now we contract out. And the fee to do taps into those kind of pipes was very low. But now that we're contracting that work, we need to charge more for that. So there are a couple of fee changes in here, as well as the general water rate increase. The fees are fairly limited across the board. It's only a handful out of many fees. The extra revenue was expected to generate is relatively small, but nevertheless, we were losing money on a couple of those services because those fees had not been adjusted in quite a long time. The other thing I pointed out downstairs was that having gone through the workshops, most people I think are familiar with what's in the budget, but I will say that there were a couple of comments regarding reserves, building reserves, adding to the reserves, and it was requested that we illustrate for board discussion purposes what a budget would look like having done a reserve deposit. So we want to point out that right now, in this current budget as it is laid out, and in the advertised maximum rate increase of it's actually 3.77%. It's easier to think of it as 3 3/4. That does include a deposit to reserves of $275,000. So as a board discussion and policy, I know that others felt that perhaps we shouldn't be doing that. If that does not happen and that deposit is then taken out of the budget, the rate increase would be 2.46%. And so those are the two differences, and it really comes down to whether we want to get back on track of adding to reserves, or whether we want to wait and maybe do that at a later date. And I guess just to be sure that everybody fully understands the backdrop, I think you also all received a letter showing that we're getting this $2.21 million from the state of New York to do work on our raw water lines. So
what do the two increases break down to per $100?
I'm sorry?
Like, what does it break down to? Like, if we were to go with the reserve account, added in the 3.77 versus the 2.4, what does it equate to, like, per dollar?
Oh, well, per household, if you take an average family for average consumption of about 55,000 gallons a year, which is what our now average household is, at 3.75% or 3.77% to be more precise. It's a little over $14 a year, so it's about $1.17 per month to the average user within that consumption range. The lower amount at the 2.46% is probably more like 80 cents a month or so, and $9 a year. So it's really, you know, it's kind of a difference of 30 to 35 cents a month between those two variations.
And as the question was brought up in the public hearing, has the county or the city made any mention if there's gonna be an increase in the sewer rates yet?
Yes, county's going up,
They are?
yeah,
What are they going
a
on?
lot.
Yes.
We haven't received any correspondence from them on it yet, but they're on a different fiscal year than we are, so
Yeah,
typically they'll be doing that, I would think.
it's because of
February,
the
March.
consent order. It's getting very expensive. And the new plant, they're rebuilding the
The wastewater
wastewater treatment plant, which is like, what, $50 million or something. It's a outrageous amount of money. It'll be more than this.
So with that information being on the table, I guess at this point, does anybody have any further questions on other aspects of the budget that we can address?
Well, I just remind everybody or point out that you do have a resolution within the packet which shows the 3.77% rate.
Do we need a move to discuss?
Or we can, if somebody wants to make a motion, we can discuss it and move or do it.
I'll move it to get it on the table.
Yeah, I'll second.
All right, discussion? You're moving the resolution as presented in it.
Yes.
The 3.77.
Yes.
Yes.
Is there any further discussion from anyone? Is, well, then I'll call for a vote. You really surprised me tonight, and thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
When's your birthday, Vince?
Anybody abstaining?
Is this birthday?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very
And I
much.
think that's a record vote when it comes
Yeah, I
to,
think so.
no, I think we've actually done pretty good on these the last few.
Oh, God, yes, you have.
We've had a couple of years where it was always interesting, but anyways, very good, everybody. Then the next item is the MVWA 2018 calendar year proposed budget.
There's no
Okay.
resolution.
So,
It's an approval.
the other thing I want to point out is that we just passed a letter around to you that says Amawalk at the top. That is Ed Marcus, our rate consultant, who was actually here for our workshop on October 10th. That Tuesday, Ed sat in on the workshop. But his task as our hired rate consultant is to evaluate West Vincentum and render a decision as to whether or not the rates are sufficient to meet the needs of the budget. So he has sent his certification letter and has indicated to you as a board that that rate that you just voted on supports the budget that goes with it. So it all works essentially.
Motion to approve the budget.
So moved.
Second, thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Next is a resolution which is in your packet regarding establishment of leave bank. Pat?
Yep, thank you. A little while back, we had a situation with an employee that had some pretty severe medical concerns and was out of time. And this board graciously agreed to do a pilot program on allowing employees to donate out of their time bank, be it sick time, vacation time, personal time, to help a fellow employee in need. While that was a pilot program, we had another employee unfortunately end up in a similar situation. He is still dealing with that now, but it's been rather severe. Was very deep in the hole, but needed to go off our payroll rather quickly to get into state disability and social security disability situations in order to protect his income and be able to deal with his medical situation. However, because of the extensive condition, there was quite a severe deficit in his sick time. I did check with our chairman, who felt that, in his opinion, the original pilot program was not sunsetted, was still in place. But, and so I'm happy to report that we did actually get enough donation of time from fellow employees to set this person on a very good path so that the stress of owing time back to us upon departure isn't going to be a concern that he's trying to deal with. It's the last thing we need to be thinking about at this point in time. However, we did say that we would bring back a policy for discussion for an ongoing basis so that we would be able to do this in the future for anybody that found themselves in that unfortunate situation. So what was sent to you on Friday was fairly concise, I guess. Our HR director, Greg Santry, worked with our attorneys, our labor attorney, Hancock and Estabrook, and then final review from Ken Bobrow to put this together. So if you have any specific comments or questions, I'm sure that between Greg and I, we can answer those for you. But this was really just a follow-up to the situation that we talked about the first time.
I'll move it.
Just,
Was there a second? Yes, Vince?
is this proposal to give the executive director the authority to form the agreement and enter into it? Or is this,
I took this to be what allows the time sharing bank, whatever you want to call it, to be a permanent asset to the company. Am I missing something here, Ben?
No, that was our interpretation, that it was a policy that would allow us in the future to enact this for employees in need if other employees needed to
do we
donate.
know the details of the plan? Is there a cap on the amount of sick leave any person can give? Is there a cap on the time used? And is there a differential consideration for who gives the hours versus who uses the hours?
Right, there's no differential distinguished because, for example, I donated time, Jim donated time, Greg donated time. The employee in question was at a lower pay rate, but it's day for day because other employees at a lower rate even than that person, were also given day for day. So when it averages out, we didn't want to get into a situation where we would say, yeah, but you make less money than that person, so your day that you're donating or your 5 days you're donating is only worth 3.2 days or something like that. We didn't want to overly complicate it. We actually got into a situation here where people were very generous. This particular employee is very well liked, was a hard worker, been here 16 years. We actually had more donations than we needed, so Greg is working out a prorated basis to refund that back to people. So as far as the cap goes, the cap is whatever's needed to make the person whole and resolve it.
Yeah, I've done a little reading on this, so I understand some of the problems associated with not having a cap on individuals giving time, and the problem is that the person can give more time than they have, and so it turns out if they get sick, they run into problems, so you have to have a cap on it. The other thing is the cap on the time used. You can give enough time so the person can be out for 2 years. So the question is the organization losing that position for a 2-year period? So somehow you have to consider the cap you put on the time used, the cap on the time donated,
Right.
and if it's going to be a long-term one, you might want to consider the differential in pay.
Could you, if you wanted to put a cap on it, could you make the cap where this extra time would carry them over to, they're able to go on to like short-term or long-term disability?
Well, that's what we did in this case, but I think the first question raised by Mr. Coyne was, though, is there a cap on how much someone can donate? Because maybe they're donating more time than they have, and that's impossible.
No, not more time than they have, but
Oh,
more
okay,
time
'cause
than
I-
they should. And so what I'm saying is that I think it's a more complex matter than just a simple establishment of the lead bank. I'm not against the lead
Right.
bank, I'm just suggesting that more thought be given to some of the issues I've mentioned.
If they're hurt on the job, then it becomes a workers' comp issue, which is entirely separate and outside of this.
I understand.
If it's something from outside of work, if it's an illness or some other kind of injury, they can only stay out based on medical supervision and doctor recommendations. So as soon as their doctor frees them up to come back, that need no longer exists. And so, whether it's 2 months or 3 months or 6 months, that's going to be determined by their doctor. And the level of donations, and it could very well be that, the donations are only going to carry them so far, and then they go
Right.
off without pay.
But there's still a period of time there before an individual can go on to long-term disability, right? How long is that? 6 months?
6 months.
Well, in this case, we
You gotta make
fast
that
tracked it.
qualified.
So I'm going to call on Greg to answer some of these, because Greg dealt with this thing right through the whole process.
Well, I don't know if I can remember every question in order to try to answer them, but I'll
Well,
try.
I'll just repeat them if you
So-
like.
I think I got it. Actually, you don't have to.
The cap on the time given, the cap on the time used, and the pay differential.
Cap on the time given, there isn't one, but we could do that. As far as Pat had mentioned, you couldn't give more than you actually have. The average person gives 3 days. The maximum you would see is maybe a little over a week.
I understand, but you see, if someone gives the sick time down to their minimum, and then they get sick, it's a round robin circumstance you're running into. And there should be a cap on the time that the person can receive the sick leave.
Well, that was, okay. Any more?
Well, I'm just suggesting that maybe it should be looked into a little bit more before we
Well, I think that's a very good point, and we'd be happy to look into it more. I can answer those questions for you right now. We actually have looked into the things you mentioned, but we could look into more too. As far as the ability for someone to be able to donate, we trust that within reason, a person is going to donate what they could afford, if it was financially a gift or if it's time out of their accrued paid time off. The average gift is 2 to 3 days. And most people have much more than that in the bank. However, it's a point well taken, and HR should look at it along with the executive director to make the determination if someone is donating, who would be considered the contributor versus, the beneficiary. If they're donating irresponsibly and we thought that put them in jeopardy, then we could address that. We wouldn't have to actually accept donations from anyone. Also, it's actually discretionary as far as whether the company engages in providing the benefits to the people and goes through the process. They have to be on leave, and that goes to the question of how much time. In order for this to be effective, they actually have to be on approved leave. Family leave is 12 weeks. We could go on a leave that's a little bit longer than that, which would be unpaid, but the company has that discretion in each case based on the physical and medical needs are treated with compassion on a different basis, but we do have the ability to be able to curtail that. We wouldn't leave a position open for 2 years and not be able to fill it. At that point, we would go with either a leave of absence, an indeterminate leave of absence, and then file with civil service to be able to fill that position pending a determination as to whether or not the person is no longer fit for duty and is incapable of coming back, or whether they do actually come back. The dollars for dollars, as Pat had mentioned, we looked at it and it pretty much averages out, but we had asked that they at least give a portion of a day. But most of the time, the numbers average out. The higher, as Pat had mentioned, if someone made a lot more money and they were to give a week, a person could receive 8 days. And if someone was on a lower paying position and they donated and they'd like to give a week, maybe it would only come out to be 3.2 days. So we thought that would make it a little bit cleaner. But your points are well taken, but the company does have the discretion to actually do that. And then the question too that you had asked about whether the particular position that we were going to establish, the resolution would ask that the executive director have the authority to be able to enter into a binding agreement with both the union Teamsters and the management union, which would have an agreement to act in unison, so that it would actually be a tri-party agreement, and it would cover unrepresented people as well.
Who would have the final say on whether that person you're going to set up the bank, as I mentioned to you earlier,
Executive.
relative to
Executive director.
potential abuse?
The executive director.
Okay. So if you had someone who had been currently abusing the sick leave and then all of a sudden did come down with a serious illness, they got a half a day left.
The funny thing is, the employees are very keen to that actual fact, and when people were determining whether or not they would like to make a distribution, they look at the individual employee and they've said, I'm not donating anything to the sick bank just for the very reason that you cited. And others in this particular situation that we're addressing now with an employee, They know how he had acted in a very responsible way and has been battling severe medical conditions. And the contribution has been overwhelming. It's like a theme for Frank
I
Capra.
understand that situation, but I wanted you to also understand that there was some control on the other side.
Yes, Vince?
I'm just suggesting that if we proceed with this, and we're dealing with the union now, we're making an agreement with the union. This is a positive agreement with the union, it's something you can't retract. I'm just suggesting we be more specific, instead of leaving it to just judgment, more specific about how we handle this. It's a long-term, I think it's a great idea, but it's a long-term thing. We ought to look at the details of it and be a little more specific. That's my opinion.
Yeah, Bruce.
Do we have any paid time off that people can lose at the end of a year?
We do. Those are called personal days. They're run on a calendar basis from January 1st. Unused, they expire on New Year's Eve.
Are we allowing them to donate time that will expire?
We're allowing them to use all paid time off, personal days, sick days, or vacation days. And the company's not matching it or anything, it's.
No, the reason is, we have a similar, where I would work, and we wouldn't allow a donation of time that was going to expire. So, you know, I had 3 weeks, well, actually I had 5 weeks. The end of the year was coming, I wasn't going to be using the time. I can't donate the 2 weeks to the catastrophic leave fund because I was going to lose it anyway. And so that's a sort of, again, you know, it hurts, especially vacation. Vacation's a balance sheet item. And so, you know, it affects the institution as well as the individuals. And I tend to agree with Vince that maybe we need to, what I'd like to do is mirror, perhaps, similar organizations in the state and see what others have done, maybe use that as a model, because then there's some experience already built in by somebody else that we can consider.
City does.
I'm in favor of a catastrophic, I mean, I was at the beginning, I was in favor, and still am in favor of a catastrophic leave fund of some sort. I just think we have to look at, I wasn't even thinking about the organized labor agreements. And now that brings a different, because you can't take away something.
But all this,
Yeah, but we're not giving them anything, they're the ones that are donating to it.
Unless it becomes
It's
part of
their
an
people.
agreement with the
Yeah.
labor union.
Pat, did you give
But
them
the one thing that
So
we're not,
it's easy to look into it, Fred.
yeah, but we're not proposing that people just donate to some holding pool that can be drawn on later. It's case by case. It's
So I
only when one
I
individual needs
understand
it, that we would then do it for that specific person. We're not throwing them in some bank that can be drawn out later by anybody that might need it. But we're not under a deadline.
Yeah, I know.
You know, we had a fairly urgent situation, we've been able to rectify it and alleviate the condition. So, you know, we're happy to, you know, go back and try to flesh out more detail.
but what this resolution is asking for is not so much the detail, it's asking to reinstate that we allow, that we do offer a, what do we call this again? The,
Leave bank.
Leave bank. So I mean, isn't that what this resolution is asking for? I mean, do we still vote on this? We could still vote on this and then have you come back with a detailed policy that the board can look at, and if we're in agreement with it, once it's all thought out. But right now, all we're asking for here in this resolution, if I understand it correctly, is just to reinstate or to offer a leave bank.
Not how it works.
Well, no, not, in this case, it's authorizing the director to enter into an MOA with the unions to establish and implement. And I agree.
But again, but not, but the policy still has to be, you know.
I sort of agree, I agree with the chair that we didn't put a sunset on the pilot. So there's nothing that's going to affect us to continue until we have something more formal that maybe we want to
Then
vote
that's
on.
fine. Just-
But I
The chair
still
can just
have,
direct the executive director to bring in a new proposal to the board.
The board can direct the chair. Direct the.
We'd be happy to
director.
investigate other models and provide something more detailed.
the one concern that I do have though is, as it relates to, it doesn't say this resolved, that the executive director would have essentially veto rights on this if it was not a proper situation, and I think that needs to be included.
So what happens if there's more time given than he needs?
Well, we
the time left.
ran into that now, and Greg is prorating to give it back to those employees.
So in that case, you do, their salary comes into play and they get back what they should be getting back.
They're getting back the days, the
Yeah.
time that they donated.
But Dave made a good point too. Do we have the policy allowed to give you veto power in the event that you see something that,
Well, that's the kind of detail I think that. it
We
sounds
need
like
to
the
look
board
at it.
wants to
Yeah,
see.
but
It doesn't really say that here in this.
Okay.
But I also agree with Bruce, and that was a very good point on personal time. So there should be I mean, I was assuming all along that the only time we were talking about was sick time. And I don't care about vacation time, that carries over, right?
Until your time bank is full. You know, only carry over so much, and then it goes away. if you
So
don't
I
use it.
would personally be opposed to the use of personal time, because why should we, you know, all of a
Yeah.
sudden that's going out the window, that's no sacrifice on behalf of the employee.
Right.
By the way, kudos to the employees
Yes,
who
this is
helped
great.
this individual out, you know.
Yeah.
It's all volunteer, it's great. So, yes, I think we have some details we have to.
Okay.
But I'd also like the understanding that should an emergency situation happen again, everybody has implemented this smoothly with this current individual. So I would like agreement that our pilot on this continues until we come up with our full policy, or whatever you want to call it, to allow Pat to have that discretion.
I don't remember a sunset on the pilot.
No, we never did this, there was not one.
do we need to vote on it?
No,
No, quick one.
unless you want a motion, I don't think it's necessary. The
So
vote would
it's
be
already in
to
place.
Just
terminate the pilot, and I'm suggesting we should not do that.
All right, well, we'll work out more detail.
But again,
And,
kudos to the employees that donated their time.
That's very
It's
generous.
very heartwarming to see that.
Are we done with that, everybody? Next item is the quarterly investment statement ending June 30, 2017, and that's in the miscellaneous tab of your packet. Jim?
Yes. Yes, in your binder is the June 30th investment report. Under Public Authorities Law, we're required to provide you from time to time an investment statement showing the balances, any earnings, any fees associated with this. This is June 30th again. We'll get you the 9-month, probably next month. Remember, we didn't have a meeting last month, so we weren't able to give this, so we will catch up. But this is as of June 30th.
Any questions for Jim? Is there a motion to approve? Yes, Bruce, thanks. Thanks, Dave, second. Any further discussion or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Texting you. Pat? Your brief executive
Right.
director's report.
I was just texting Channel 2. So, let her know what happened after the vote. Yes, thank you. And first I want to introduce the stranger in the room here. Greg Mason is with the Observer Dispatch. Newer to the area, been there since April. Comes to us by way of Syracuse, so welcome. And hope you like the Mohawk Gun. Thank you. Secondly, I just want to... What's that?
You didn't say yes or no.
That's an
I mean,
opinion.
we take that as a yes.
He's a reporter.
No,
Okay,
yes,
very good, all right.
He has
You
to
like
be
the water?
unbiased. He has to be unbiased. I mentioned the $2.2 million that is awarded from the state.
Congratulations. That's great.
Yes.
Excellent job.
That's very good news. At first, as Dick and I were discussing it, we thought maybe they made a mistake because we submitted an application for phase 2 of the raw water line in the amount of $8 million. That went in June or July, whenever the deadline was for this round of infrastructure funding. So when they told us 2.2 and it said, based on an estimated project cost of 3.2, we went, whoa, wait a minute, that's not right. So we thought we'd have a bite at the apple to go back and say, no, we asked for 8, maybe you guys misunderstood. Dick found out earlier today that what they actually were reacting to was an application that was sent in more than a year ago for phase 1, which was the pipe bridge, which was put in at $3.2 million. So I don't know whether they looked at both the applications and said, this one's less, so let's fund that one. I guess a lesson learned is that anytime we're submitting one for a higher amount, we ought to go tell them we don't want the lower one. If If it's the other way around, that's different.
You don't know if the other one's still in the hopper.
Well, we're assuming it is. We thought because we submitted it over a year ago that it didn't make through that round and they were only gonna be looking at the new one. So hopefully, the one we submitted this year will remain under consideration for future funding, and we'll see what happens with that. But at any rate, it's good to be getting that money, and it'll help us go a long way. We've already funded the Pipe Bridge project, in part by bonding, in part from the debt service reserve funds, but this will allow us to finish that project up and begin some of the work on the new raw water line. And, every couple hundred feet of that new line we can get in place gives us better capacity to, withstand slightly lower water levels at the reservoir. So it's good insurance all the way around. Last thing I was going to mention before we go to executive session is that we had all those costs associated with the winter storm. We did all the snow removal. We helped the city dig out fire hydrants, et cetera, et cetera. FEMA did indicate that we were going to be eligible, the whole area. So our engineering staff attended a couple of meetings with FEMA and submitted all of our numbers. We're told that it's going to be reimbursed and funded. We're looking at somewhere between $80,000 and $90,000 roughly in reimbursement costs for personnel time, equipment use, et cetera. Although we haven't seen it yet. So
Well, yeah, we're still finishing up the submittal of the paperwork, we have for mid-November.
yeah, it's a pretty big bureaucratic nightmare, but any kind of reimbursement we get is a good thing. So I just want to mention that if we can get our hands on that and get that secured and put in the bank, we'll certainly let you know as soon as that happens. And we do have another issue, but I will reserve that for executive session, so unless there's any other questions, I'd be happy to take them. If not,
Any old business? Any new business? We need your motion to go into executive session regarding labor negotiations.
Motion.
Second.
Yes, good job.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you.